Hi, and thanks for joining today's webinar, Unlocking Insights with Text Analytics. My name is Dina Otero, and I'll be today's moderator. Just a couple housekeeping items before I introduce today's speakers. This webinar is being recorded, so the recording and the slides will be shared with all of our attendees after the webinar. Also, our speakers will gladly answer any questions that you have, so please submit them in the chat window found on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. We're going to hold all questions till the end for Q&A. So today we're joined by Holly DeMuro, Product Marketing Director, and Jason Bryce, Subject Matter Expert here at Confirmit. Jason is a highly experienced technical consultant. His focus on social and text analytics is based on his in-depth understanding of key techniques. Holly is a regular webinar presenter and speaker at market research events, regularly providing guidance on key MR topics such as creating engaging surveys, generating ROI, and the role of automation. So welcome to both of you today, and with that, I'd like to pass it on to Jason.
Yeah, hi. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are listening from. Thank you for joining today's Confirmit webinar, which is about unlocking insights with text analytics. My name is Jason Bryce, and I'm the text analytics subject matter here at Confirmit. I help businesses deliver high-quality voice of the customer, voice of the employee, and market research programs using the Confirmit solutions, and I focus on social and text analytics using in-depth understanding of key techniques, including predictive modeling, machine learning, data mining algorithms, and neural network models. I also work closely with the Confirmit customers carrying out implementations and program enhancements to ensure clients are able to develop clear insights from their unstructured data. So today we're going to go through the what, the why, and the how of text analytics. So let's start. We know that your executive team doesn't have time to listen to all your customers' stories. What happens if your CEO listens to or talks to only 2 or 3 customers, and then he or she goes to the exec team stating that these are the things that you need to focus on? This means that your executive team will be making strategic business decisions based on only those 2 to 3 stories. Surely that can't be right. But how do you make them listen to the right stories? Text analytics can help businesses listen to those right stories by extracting the insights from the free text and then combining it with the existing business or feedback data, such as survey data, in order to get a holistic view of where to focus or prioritize the business and where to make those business improvements. I'm sure you're attending this webinar because you're thinking about implementing a text analytics for your VOC or VOE program. There's a chance that you're thinking that it's too hard and it's too much work to set up. And you may be wondering about the accuracy of the analysis. You may be also questioning the value of implementing text analytics. In this webinar, I'm going to look at all these points in detail. In order to look at the what is text analytics, we need to start by looking at the feedback landscape. When you're wanting to analyze data to understand your customers, consumers, or employees, are thinking you'll be looking at both the structured and unstructured data. Both are very important and need to be analyzed together. Let me explain why. Structured data comes from questions that have been defined and asked through surveys, where a respondent is asked to give a numerical rating to a question. These are fixed metrics like demographic information or rating metrics, such as your Net Promoter Score. These metrics are pretty insightful in that they give you something to measure and you can do all kinds of analysis with. such as your key driver analysis, or it may be your predictive analysis, but they are not the full picture. Unstructured data gives you the form of the open text through survey comments. It could be social posts, email, CRM, and so on. And they help us gather even richer feedback. So leveraging your unstructured data together with your structured data from surveys can provide the qualitative why behind the quantitative responses. And this provides the color in our analysis. We know that unstructured data is harder to analyze than structured data, but around 80% of customer feedback data comes in the form of unstructured data, and it provides an opportunity for better research. We also know that survey fatigue is on the rise, and one way to address this is to shorten surveys by asking open-ended questions. This allows us to get meaning and value from our respondents by asking them, say, 2 to 3 structured questions with 2 to 3 open-ended comments. By getting them to answer open-ended questions, you are giving your customer or your employee or your consumer their voice, and they can tell you exactly what it is that's important to them. And then analyzing these comments through text analytics provides you with the meaningful metrics, and then using the text analytics categorization model, you are basically asking closed questions of the text data and getting the response for analysis. So shortening your survey by removing a lot of closed questions and replacing them with open-ended text questions, and then using the technology to derive the quant data for analysis, will not only see your response rates rise, but you should also get better quality analysis. As I said, think of text analytics as a means to ask closed questions of open-ended responses. There are 2 types of text analytics. First, does the open-ended text talk about a particular category or not? And second, if it does talk about a category, does it do so in a positive, negative, or neutral way? You build a categorization model to enable the technology to ask the categorization question of the text data. A categorization model might include high-level categories. Let's have a look at staff, or product, or service, or it could even be around price. Within each category, you define a series of subcategories. Then the technology is effectively asking, does this text talk about staff? And if so, which type of staff is it talking about? And what attributes of those staff? It could be behavior, such as helpfulness, knowledge, friendliness, and so are mentioned. You can then analyze all your text, wherever it comes from, using the same hierarchical categorization model and that quant data analysis of which categories, subcategories, and attributes are being talked about. Together with the volume of mentions, can be analyzed alongside all the other quant data that may be captured. As well as categorizing the text, you can do sentiment analysis. So for a text response, you can use the text analytics technology to determine whether the text is overall positive, negative, or neutral. Text analytics provides an overall sentiment for your text, so an overall score for the whole verbatim. But you can use the technology to ask whether the text is commenting in a positive, negative, or neutral way for each mention of a category, subcategory, or attribute. So for one piece of text, you may find different categories mentioned, and the sentiment analysis can be different for each category within that same text. Let me give you an example. If I was to use the sentence, The staff are very helpful, but the product was out of stock. When you look at this sentence, you can immediately see that the customer is happy about the staff and not so happy about the product being out of stock. When a sentiment engine looks at this sentence, it is likely to give a neutral overall sentiment because the positive and negative cancel each other out. But let's explore that a little further. Text Analytics provides a sentiment score for each theme picked up in the text. So for the example I've just used, the staff are very helpful, but the product was out of stock. The category sentiment for staff is positive, and the category sentiment for product is negative. And the Text Analytics technology will aggregate both, and the overall sentiment for this sentence is neutral. We can now understand the key issues that this customer is talking about. With all the customer feedback, we can have an aggregated view of what the most important issues are to the business. Once you have your data from Text Analytics, number of hits per category and average sentiment per category, you can combine these with the rest of your customer feedback, your structured data, and your input from other business systems. You can also run that same Text Analytics model on other unstructured data, from maybe social media posts or other forms of feedback. It's important to analyze and look at the numbers and metrics you're getting, but it's also important to drill down into the actual comments in order to provide you with the color and context of what your respondents actually think. Text Analytics adoption is still pretty low, but as the technology matures, we are now seeing a much faster adoption rate. It seems that companies have been slow to take up and realize the potential of Text Analytics, but the noise around big data and Text Analytics has definitely grown, and potential is beginning to be realized as organizations understand that implementing a good Text Analytics solution can bring added insights into their existing program. The tools have become far more advanced and easier to work with, and the accuracy of the analysis can now be better than if you were to use human coders. And don't forget the speed of getting the result. We recently implemented a Genius Text Analytics for a customer that had been doing manual coding according to their own defined categorization model. After building that categorization model using Confirmit Genius, we ran the Text Analytics task and produced a set of results, which we compared against the human coder results. When we started out, we assumed that the human coders had 100% accuracy and Genius had around 80% accuracy. But after queuing those results, we found that the human coder's accuracy had been reduced to below 90%, and Genius's results had increased to above 90%. And this was due to miscategorization of comments and missed categories, where Genius had found categories that the human coders had skipped. It's a great validation of taking on Text Analytics, as they are now getting better results and saving much more time and effort and getting rid of the manual element. I'm now going to hand you over to Holly, who will go through some specific examples for some different markets.
Thanks, Jason. So yeah, the next segment here we're going to dive into is why is this all so important? And of course, the best way to look at why this is important is to look at what others have done, how they benefit from using Text Analytics. So let's dive right in and look at BSI, better known as British Standards Institute. They had a lot of text coming in from various sources. Now this company is actually producing a wide range of standards in the UK for different types of products and services. So they're obviously receiving a lot of information coming in, and their account managers are responsible for quite a few large-scale accounts. which of course with all that the massive amounts of text that are coming in for those large-scale accounts from these different areas and regions that they're supporting, it can be really difficult for them to be able to do something with all that data in aggregate. So all that unstructured text that they're getting from surveys, sales reviews, emails, compliance data, CRM notes, et cetera, across multiple markets, multiple languages was just basically unusable. So in using text analytics, ultimately, they were able to aggregate all this information, find out what the sentiment is across the different categories for their organization. They were able to make sense of all of the information, combining the data, and ultimately drive action forward by knowing exactly what the customers were saying in their verbatim text. So it was a pretty powerful use case. One interesting thing that this company had done as well was that they implemented hierarchical reports so that they could actually display the findings from their text analytics to different people within the organization who needed different levels of detail. So for example, the account managers would receive something that was, of course, much more detailed, something they could dive in and then deal with, take action on the various requirements from the direct customers. But then at the higher levels in the organization, the executives, they would be able to have a bigger, broader view of the whole organization without having to go into the nitty-gritty, down into those details. So that was a really powerful use case on the B2B side. And of course, there are instances where you're not B2B. There are many of those. So let's take a look also at a B2C example, business to consumer. And a great example of that is Sony Mobile. And with Sony, this is a great company. They were ultimately looking to implement a text analytics platform, but they're a pretty sizable organization. They're actually open in 54 different markets. They deal with multiple languages, and they have many, many, many product releases per year. So again, a lot of stuff that's happening. And they had some suspicions that a good chunk of what was happening on social media. So they wanted to go out and collect social media data, see what people were saying about them. So this was a little bit different in that they weren't just using surveys and CRM notes and internal data, but they were actually going out and scraping across the internet, again, in these multiple languages, multiple markets, and constantly pulling that information in to see what people were saying. What was really great about Sony's situation in particular is that they ended up finding some really interesting things. Not only did they discover that people were turning to social media to talk about their grievances or concerns with the product, but they found out that they were actually doing that first. Before the people were even bothering to call the contact center or the call center about any support-related issues, they were turning to social media. I mean, seriously, talk about a potential PR nightmare, right? But in scraping social media, pulling that in and analyzing it, as quickly as these comments were being put up, they were ultimately able to find out what these key problems were. And in that way, they were able to then prepare or create solutions for the call center people. So when the calls did start coming in, the contact or call center people were actually prepared to answer the questions because they knew in advance what the problems or concerns were. So it was a pretty powerful thing for Sony, and it turned out to be a tool that they were able to use to prevent those potential PR nightmares. Now, of course, they were also using their survey data and their CRM data. They definitely found quite a bit of value from the CRM data as well. Again, very similar. They were able to see a bunch of issues and things that were, happening with the customers, which was absolutely great. Again, this was a big thing for them because time and again, their call center agents were not appropriately categorizing the calls. So everything was being listed as other. Typical thing that happens in business. People can get a little lazy sometimes. So everything being listed as other didn't really give them the ability from the CRM alone to see what the customers were thinking or what they were saying. So this is something like Jason was talking about, a somewhat manual categorization that was just gone wrong. And ultimately, using a text analytics program, this totally turned it around for them so they could actually identify those issues and take action very, very quickly. So hopefully that kind of sets the stage on the why. And now perhaps, Jason, maybe you and I can go through some hows. How do we do this? We want to get started?
Sure. Okay, so the first best practice I'd say is one size does not fit all. So you will need to model your data according to your business. Although they're great starting points, an industry standard or an automatically generated categorization model, it will not be modeled to give you the best insights. So you should seek expert help for starting out in the right direction for building out a categorization model, but look to take ownership as soon as you can and maintain the model yourself. Holly?
Great, thank you. So the next best practice, in my opinion at least, and I'm sure Jason would agree, is don't try to boil the ocean. Text analytics does require some setup, and of course, you're doing something new. If you don't have a text analytics program in place right now, it is something new. So you definitely want to start out small, maybe a single source of unstructured data, and grow from there. But as you're growing, grow implementing the learnings that you've discovered throughout the process of the initial setup and any subsequent setups. Jason, want to take the next one?
Yeah, okay. So don't forget to take action. So collecting and analyzing the data means nothing if you're not doing anything with it. Use an action management system to create cases for low sentiment or trigger words in order to close the loop. Okay, so we set out to explore unlocking insights, and we now have all the information to do so. And we spoke about using all forms of feedback in order to get the full picture and of how to get feedback from millennials. We now know that open-ended questions can shorten your surveys and provide lots of value by delivering better quality research and by reducing the overhead of manual analysis. And we've just been through some best practices, which are to model your data, make sure that you're using all your business data, start with one source of unstructured text, and grow at a pace that you think you can handle. And then lastly, don't forget to take action. Remember that text analytics can help you to unlock that door to drive business improvement and increase customer satisfaction. Okay, so we've come to the end of the slides, and we hope that you found this session useful. If you have any questions, can you please request that you submit them to the Q&A box now, and Dina will address those questions to us.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks, Holly. All right, so yes, as a reminder, if you have any questions, go ahead and submit them in the chat, and we'll flag them. All right, so we'll start. Holly, first question, I guess, will be directed to you. How can we encourage respondents to provide detailed or thorough open text answers?
Good question. That's obviously always a concern. You've got the people who will respond back to your question on, for example, how service was by simply saying was good, which is certainly not enough to actually do much with in terms of text analytics. Especially if you're trying to put good categories together and so on and so forth. So we do want to do whatever is possible to try and get people to provide more meaningful detail in their open ends. We actually have a solution with Confirmit. We've got a solution called a dynamic open text question type. What it does basically is it encourages the respondents to provide more details by giving them a color-coded gauge associated with their typing. So it's sort of a quantitative measurement of how much that they've written into the text box. But simultaneously, there's also little notes that come up that kind of read what they've written in the text box and encourage them to provide additional detail. So these little pop-up notes come and say, for example, oh, we're glad you were happy. Tell us a bit more. So we've got this option that kind of drives people to provide that additional detail. I think it's quite powerful. We've seen with some of the organizations who are using it now that they have seen a dramatic improvement in the quality of responses that they're getting because of just implementing this tool.
Okay, thank you. This is a great question that I think can go to Jason. What volume of feedback do you need do you need to be receiving for text analytics to be optimized?
So we typically say around 5,000 open text comments a year. We can do analysis on smaller data sets if you so wish, but if we were talking about an ongoing study, then you'd be looking to get 5,000 open text responses a year. So it could be that you're doing one survey. If it has 3 open text questions, then obviously look at that as 3 responses.
Okay. Holly, can your text analytics be used on text from sources other than open-ended survey questions?
Oh, of course. So text analytics can be used on, again, open-end surveys. It can be used on CRM notes and call center notes and emails. And as I mentioned in one of the case studies that we discussed, also even social media stuffs. And of course, social media doesn't stop with, Facebook and Twitter. It also goes into forums and blogs and so on. So really, yeah, any source of text can definitely be brought in and analyzed according to the needs of the organization.
Okay, thanks. Jason, back to you. How do you handle languages?
So we use Google Translate. We translate the verbatim in real time. There's a couple of reasons why we use Google Translate. Firstly, it enables us to support you because we've got a great team here at Confirmit. The sentiment engine, our sentiment engine is based in English. It's a lot quicker to get you up and running if you have one model based in English, and it will also save a lot of time. It may be that if you are building one categorization model in English and you're building another one in German, etc., you have to align all the categories, make sure that the categories are the same, and that can be very time consuming. So if you want to get up and running quickly, it's best to translate the categorization model and build it and start out in English.
Thank you. Holly, back to you. In the case study, how did the feedback from social media get fed back to the contact centers, especially as they operated across multiple markets?
Absolutely. So ultimately what Sony Mobile did and what most customers using text analytics would do as well is that they leverage role-based dashboards. And of course, I had mentioned that they were using hierarchical reporting so that those role-based dashboards could be created. Ultimately, the dashboards are provided to the different people based on what they need to see, and they're available, real-time 24/7, so people can go in and see exactly what the feedback is and what they need to do. So that was their means of deployment. Just as a side note, obviously, we had a pretty small-scale example of the case study here. We have a full written case study, multiple pages, goes into all the detail, which can be provided to anybody who's interested. So you can see a little bit more about what Sony Mobile did and how they did it, including how they deployed their dashboards and got everybody on board behind this initiative. So I'll be happy to provide that out to you.
Okay, thank you. So I know there are more questions that came through, but we are out of time today. We will follow up with you after the webinar to respond to your questions. But if you do have any additional questions, please feel free to contact Jason or Holly. Their email addresses are still on the screen, and we'll keep it open for a few more minutes. But thank you again for everyone that joined today's webinar, and Holly and Jason, thank you very much for presenting. I hope you have a great rest of your day.